This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Well, welcome to this episode of Real Talk. Jesperson here with John Hicks. This episode, we take you inside the eye of a storm. Storm chaser Aaron Jayjack joining us in mere moments. This guy, an absolute legend. It was his footage that you probably watched if you were keeping a keen eye on that Didsbury tornado back on July 1st on Canada Day. It was a tornado that caught the attention of people, quite frankly, around the world, and in large part because of the intensity of the footage that Aaron Jayjack captured. This guy is wired differently than most of us. He goes right into the heaviest storms. We're talking wind, of course, up to the tornado type status. We're talking about softball sized hail. We're talking about some of the biggest blizzards you've ever seen. We're going to find out what makes them tick and what it was like to witness the devastation of that Didsbury twister firsthand.
Crazy.
Plus, man, that footage that you've been looking through this morning, I just want to pick this guy's brain on, like, what does it take sort of from a courage standpoint, or maybe he'll use a different word, to head towards something that everybody else is getting the hell out of the way of.
Maybe I shouldn't say it, but balls of steel. And it's funny because when the Didsbury thing happened, I went back and watched Twister, of course, the big movie from back in the day, and just insane what you have to have inside you to go after these things. Right?
And then his footage, and we're going to show this to you. This is an episode, obviously, if you're listening to us as you're walking your dog or on your road trip, thanks for downloading the podcast. But in my opinion, this is an episode you're going to want to watch on YouTube because we're going to be showing you a whole bunch of video, and Aaron will be taking us through it. On the second half of the episode, we'll sit down. Conservative Member of Parliament Mike Lake is going to join me in studio. We heard from Liberal Cabinet Minister Randy Boissonnault yesterday. You're going to hear from the Environment Minister, the federal Environment Minister, Guilbeault, on this show tomorrow. We want to have a fulsome conversation about Canada's net zero targets. It all kind of fits, doesn't it? We're talking to people about the magnitude of these storms, and then we're talking to people about climate change. And I'm not saying that oil and gas causes tornadoes. We're not drawing direct lines there, but we are taking a look at things like floods and wildfires and understanding, that we all have our part to play. Now, how we play that part is the question, and you're going to hear different perspectives from politicians from different parties on this show. We look to you for your analysis of this, and you can send us an email, your thoughts anytime, to talk@ryanjesperson.com. A couple of trash talk submissions received yesterday after our politics talk. Of course, that's coming up on Friday, your chance to blow off a little steam. Before we get to Aaron Jayjack, wanted to let you know that this episode of Real Talk is presented by our friends at Danatech. Do you need safety training that actually makes a difference on your job site? Danatech has been the leader in Canadian safety training for more than 30 years. Their online, blended, and instructor-led training courses combine regulatory compliance with real-world smarts and practical tips from experts who actually know how job sites work, let alone busy ones, right? You can visit danatech.com today to check out their course catalog and train your team the right way at danatech.com. Well, as mentioned, Aaron Jayjack is a storm chaser, a professional one at that tracks down some of the world's most extreme weather. He's seen hundreds of tornadoes. He's been inside of some major hurricanes, including the Category 5 Michael down in Florida back in 2018. He's covered dozens of major blizzards, and he has tens of thousands of fans that subscribe to his YouTube channel and, of course, take in what he's witnessing firsthand. Now, I can do an all right job of introducing Aaron Jayjack, but he probably, I would say, would do a better job introducing himself.
This is Storm Chaser Aaron Jayjack, just in the southwest of Didsbury, Alberta, with a tornado in progress right now, moving off to the east. Big tornado forming overhead, intermittent touchdowns, big funnel cloud overhead. Stay alert if you are downstream from Didsbury, Alberta. Big tornado forming right now. Not tornado warn when it's about to touch down.
Now, more than 1 million people have watched his footage of that July 1st storm, and he joins us now live. Aaron Jayjack, welcome to Real Talk. It's nice to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me here on Real Talk. And actually, that was a pretty fantastic description of myself and what I do. So
Well,
I applaud you on that.
Well, listen, I'm not gonna say I've been following you for years, because I haven't. I only have just discovered you, and I haven't stopped DMing you on Twitter ever since. Because the deeper I get into your YouTube channel, the more intrigued I am. What makes you tick? How did you get into this? What sort of nerve do you have to head straight for something like that? But help us understand what led up to July 1st. Like, where are you right now? How do you track storms, and what prompts you to drive halfway across the continent?
Yeah, so right now I'm in Boissevain, Manitoba. I'm a U.S. citizen, but I am in the process of becoming a permanent resident here in Canada. My wife is a Canadian, and she's a storm chaser as well. She has a full-time job, but so doesn't storm chase professionally. But we met on Twitter back in 2018, and then things have taken off from there. And we have a son together. His name's Jet, like the jet stream. And yeah, so every day I desire to be in the biggest, baddest storms. So every morning I wake up, and first thing I do is get a cup of coffee and start looking at weather models. And in this particular chase, I had been watching the weather models for at least a week out from that Alberta system, that storm chase, and I had kind of seen that there were hints that there was going to be severe weather in Alberta on Canada Day, on that Saturday, even the day before, and so as the day got closer to Canada Day, I started honing in on more of a target area, and I left the day before, Friday, and my initial target area was kind of the Red Deer and to the southwest towards the foothills, towards the Rocky Mountains was kind of my target area. So I left Friday and drove all the way got to Medicine Hat and stayed the night in Medicine Hat. Woke up Saturday morning, looked at, again, surface observations, looked at weather models. And to me, it looked like that likely a storm, the tornado, was going to happen near Olds, Alberta. So I was driving along Highway 2 to the north, midday, around lunchtime, looking off to the west towards the foothills, and I could start to see the storm starting to bubble up. And I eventually I got to a point where, okay, I need to go to the west and wait right here, because I think it's going to happen right here. And that was Olds, Alberta. I went to Olds, Alberta, got some lunch at a little place, I think Prairie Donair.
Nice.
What it was called. I had Donair for the first time in Nova Scotia last year, chasing Fiona. So now I have this kind of a love for Donair. So
how did the Donair stack up in Olds?
It was decent. It wasn't as good as the one that I had in Nova Scotia. So, but
we're going to hear from like the Donair lobby now, because there's like in our hometown of Edmonton, there's like 100 shops that fight it out for supremacy. I'm not even going to start naming them, because I'm going to make friends, but I'll make more enemies in the process of doing so. So you have lunch in Olds, and what are you keeping? And so now obviously you've got some weather models, and you've got some, I'm sure, some apps and some tech that you have access to, but you've also got just your gut instinct, right? You're watching the sky, you're feeling the air pressure, I'm imagining.
Well, yeah, 100% that, right? I get to Olds, and I could tell a storm's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. What I wasn't expecting was how rapidly things would occur. So I go in to get my Donair. It's kind of a sunny skies and not much going on, but just a little bit of bubbling of clouds off to the west. I get my Donair, walk out of the restaurant, and all of a sudden I could see that, oh my God, like things are really going to go bonkers here. Sky is dark. I could tell a big time storm was brewing off to the west. So I started driving towards it while I was eating my Donair.
So everybody else is either fleeing the area. Maybe I'm being dramatic. A lot of people are certainly taking cover. They're paying attention to the storm warnings. We all got them on our phones. That sort of that sort of mass text that goes out, and everybody goes, "Oh my gosh!" When people see when most, and don't take offense to this, Aaron, I was going to say, when most normal people, when regular people get a message like this, an alert on their phone, they pay close attention. There was one down in Calgary just yesterday, and we heard from our family members down there. They're in the basement per the instructions, but here you are. You're racing toward it. This is, granted, a very civilian type question, but how do you know you're not going to get swept up in this? Like, you're driving your Subaru, right? And you're heading straight for this thing. It could change paths, and all of a sudden you could find yourself, 100 meters in the air, right?
Yeah, well, it all comes down to experience. So all of these storms, a supercell, which is generally what spawns a tornado, they all have the similar structure. You know, they have what's called a rain-free base, which is the updraft area where the tornado is going to form. Warm air, moist air rises up into the storm, and then it ejects out away from the storm downwind and moves that rain away so that the storm can breathe and pull in that energy. And so once you have a lot of experience, you've seen thousands of storms like I have. I mean, you can just look at a storm and tell where the tornado is going to happen. And in fact, the tornado was on the ground, and I was reporting it on Twitter before there were even tornado warnings going out. Even before the storm was producing a tornado, I tweeted out on Twitter. I was like, this is going to be a very dangerous storm very shortly. So be paying attention, right? And then, you know, I did got a little bit of traction on the tweet, but not much. But then the tornado formed, and then things just went bonkers from there.
All right, we want to, like, we're showing people a bunch of your footage, and it's remarkable. And I want to get nerdy, by the way, in a second. Ask you about your tech setup and how that all works too. But Johnny, we pulled a few clips here. Why don't we go here? So this is like as all hell is breaking loose. Here he is.
We gotta go check on this house. Oh my God. Oh my God. It's bad, guys. It's very bad damage. Oh my God. Oh my God. That house looks okay. This looks like a farm off to the right. Oh, this house got hit bad. Oh my God.
So for people that are just listening to this, you're seeing basically just splintered remains of a couple of properties. This tornadoes pass through there, what, like 45 seconds before you're there? The dust has barely settled. What's going through your mind? Is your heart beating? Like, how are you feeling? You're obviously concerned about human life. You're there to check on people's well-being. Take us through that.
Yeah, so as I'm driving up to the tornado, right before that clip you just showed, you know, I saw the tornado moving towards the highway. One of the things I'm doing, you asked about tech, I have a 360 camera. Actually, I have two of them mounted at the top of the car. And I'm trying to capture 360 video to where people can put on virtual reality goggles and actually experience what it's like to be right up next to one of these beasts. And to be able to get good footage, you got to get right up next to it. I mean, I actually wish I'd have gotten a little bit closer, but you got to get really, really close, right? And so as I'm driving up to it, I saw a roof go flying, I saw debris flying. So I knew it was starting to hit structures. Even hear me yell like, oh, it hit something big. And, you know, what's going through my mind is that at that point, it goes from joy, because for me, being right next to a tornado like that, it's like the most blissful, joyous experience of my life. Like, I will drive 30 hours for these things, right? Just for that 15 minutes. Sometimes it's only 30 seconds, but 15 minutes of complete, absolute joy for me. But that joy sometimes turns into a nightmare. I thought for sure I was going to find injured or even deaths from this tornado after seeing the damage that it had done. In fact, it was one of the most, it's hard to even put into words. Like, when I was looking off to the left at the tornadoes, I'm driving up to the houses, it was like glitter, sparkling. All the little bits of the farm was just churned up and swirling around. And I had never seen anything like that before. I've seen hundreds of tornadoes, thousands of storms, and I'd never seen it where it was like little bits of glitter just flying around. So I thought for sure I was going to find deaths or injuries.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible that no human lives were lost through the course of that storm. Obviously, some livestock was lost, and I know that that's a tough situation. But generally speaking, when you look at that swath of destruction, I mean, part of me, I imagine if that happens over an urban center, you're talking about a completely different ballgame. We know that here in Edmonton, almost 30 people killed back in 1987.
Yeah, if this tornado would have hit a big city like Edmonton or Calgary, it would have been really, I mean, there would have been, 30 deaths, maybe more than that. It would have been very, very bad. It was a violent tornado. The roar. So I've seen lots of tornadoes, right? So I can look at a tornado and get a pretty good idea of how strong it is. And I knew this one was violent. You even hear me in my video, I'm yelling, it's violent. It's a violent tornado. I could see the double inflow jets as it's pulling in air, right? I could see an inflow jet is where you see this stream right along the ground, and it's moisture and dirt and debris being sucked into the vortex, turned around, and then shot up into the atmosphere. And based on that, and then the roar, only the strongest, the top echelon of tornadoes have this roar. So I knew I even thought maybe it was an EF5 tornado. It crossed my mind. I didn't want to say that, but it crossed my mind right at the moment. It was maybe an EF5, ends up being an EF4 tornado. So
Aaron,
very violent, very strong.
For those of us that don't really understand like the ratings or how it all works, when you said I almost wanted to call it an EF5, but I didn't, is that like rating a restaurant a perfect 10 type thing? Like, take us through the difference.
Yeah, so there's the rating goes from EF0 to EF5. The majority of your tornadoes are going to be EF2 and lower. An EF0 tornado might break some tree limbs. An EF1 tornado start doing damage to a home, maybe ripping some shingles off, ripping off siding. EF2 tornado is going to start destroying a house, breaking down walls, and maybe ripping the roof off. And then you start getting into the EF3, EF4, EF5 tornadoes. EF3 can destroy a home, but maybe not completely. It'll leave some walls standing. That's why they say get into a middle part of your home, into a bathroom with no windows, because a lot of times an EF3 tornado will just knock down outer walls and leave those bathroom walls standing. Now, when you get into the EF4s, the violent tornadoes, EF4s and EF5s, and EF4 is going to be total devastation to a home, knock all the walls down. This tornado rolled a combine like 50 meters. And, you're very rare that you're going to have an EF4 or EF5 tornado. And then the EF5s are the most rare. In fact, there's only been one in Canadian history. 2007, Ely, Manitoba was an F5 tornado. And there has not been any other F5 or EF5 tornadoes in Canada since then. This one, an EF4, was only the second EF4 in Alberta. The strongest tornado since 1987, Black Friday Edmonton tornado, was an EF4. And I think the last EF4 in Canada was in 2013. So again, a rare tornado. An EF5 tornado is going to sweep everything away. All you're going to be left with is maybe a slab, and that's it. There'll be nothing left. That debris will be, just ripped away from the home site that was destroyed. And it's actually hard to get an EF5 tornado because the enhanced Fujita scale is based on damage indicators. And damage indicators are, for example, an EF5 tornado is going to need to hit a well-built home, a home that's been bolted down very well to its foundation, down to the ground, and bolts essentially get sheared off and blown away. As an example, an EF5 tornado in Joplin, Missouri was able to pick up those concrete blocks in a parking lot that when you drive up to, that are flat to the ground, so wind can't even get underneath them. They weigh several hundred pounds. And in Joplin, Missouri, they picked up these blocks and blew them away. And then even moved a hospital, which is usually a very, very well-built, fortress. It moved the hospital off its foundation, and that hospital had to be destroyed and rebuilt. So EF5 is very, very rare event, 201 plus mile per hour tornado.
It's just hard to wrap your mind around it. Back on May the 8th, and people can check our podcast archives, check out our YouTube channel if they want to watch it. We talked to Mike Flanagan. Mike's, I think, widely regarded as one of Canada's most in-the-know wildfire experts, and he was talking to us about the real intensity of the early wildfire season, and he talked about the impact of climate change, and really interesting insight for anybody that wants to watch that. That was on May the 8th. You've been storm chasing for years. Your sample size obviously isn't 2,000 years on planet Earth, but based on what you've seen over the past while, in your estimation, is storm activity getting worse? Are they getting more intense, more frequent? What are your observations?
My observations are that things are becoming more frequent, especially when you get into like tropical cyclones, which really, so one of the things with warming is that warming that air, that's creating the environment, the atmosphere to be more moisture laden. And hurricanes really feed off that warm, moist air. And, I've been chasing for over 20 years. And in the last 10 years, I've been in several major hurricanes. And, if you look at the statistics, like it's more major hurricanes than previously you would have seen, in that 10-year time span. Right. But again, it's a small sample size. But to me, my anecdotal evidence is that storms are becoming more frequent. The more powerful ones are becoming more frequent, but it's not necessarily making storms any more intense. It's just those intense storms may be happening more frequently. Right. we're bound by the laws of physics here on Earth, which is a constant, and you're not going to get a hurricane that's producing 1,000-mile-per-hour winds, for example, because of climate change, right? But you may see more frequent Category 5, Category 4 hurricanes. You may be seeing more frequent tornado outbreaks, and things of that nature.
We're talking to Aaron Jayjack, professional storm chaser, joining us right now from Manitoba, although I guess with you could be anywhere over the next number of days, depending on how it goes. Hang tight. In just a second, we want your take on this. You filmed a remarkable hailstorm in Roswell, New Mexico, but we'll play some of that video. People won't believe it. We get to watch your windshield get blown to smithereens in real time. It's one of the wildest videos that I've ever seen. And then we'll get to some of the questions that are being submitted from Real Talkers that are tuning in live on our YouTube stream. It's professional storm chaser Aaron Jayjack. This conversation is presented by Real Talk sponsors like Complete Care Restoration. They're our only sponsor that hopes that you never have to call them. That's their wish. They hope to never meet any of you. No offense. But if you do find yourself in the gut punch situation of experiencing fire or flood damage in particular, this time of year, there's entire communities that are dealing with these rebuilds, trying to get your lives back in order, get that number one investment of yours, your home, back into how it looked before the disaster struck. You're going to want to get in touch with Complete Care Restoration. Chances are, if you check out the small print in your insurance policy, you can choose who you want to do the work. So, if life happens like this, maybe you found mold or asbestos during a renovation, check them out online at CompleteCareRestoration.ca or give them a call at 780-454-0776. If your construction project is a little different, maybe your family's just looking to find some more efficient or livable space. Maybe you'd love to boost up the appeal of your property. Maybe you're looking to turn maybe a former bedroom into a new office, or maybe a guest area, or maybe you're looking to get your garage finally working for you so you can get those rakes and hoses off the floor and up into a custom area where they belong. Nobody does it better than California Closets. Now, most people think of them for custom closets and storage solutions for the entire home, but they're doing amazing work in garages. You can check it out online at californiaclosets.ca. Get some inspiration from some of the design ideas you see there, but the best move you can make is to do what we did, and that's request a free consultation. Talk to their team about your priorities and let them come up with a fully custom solution. It's California Closets, online at californiaclosets.ca. And before we get back to our professional storm chaser, I want to remind you, if you're a decision maker in Alberta or Saskatchewan, whether it's for a big business, maybe it's a ma and pa retail location, or maybe you're working for a municipality, if you're in charge of coming up with a game plan for garbage and recycling collection, take 2 seconds today to check out localenvironmental.ca. They're working in Alberta and Saskatchewan, doing better than what those big multinationals are doing. Better service, better prices, and more support for local causes. You can check out how they can help you today by visiting localenvironmental.ca. You can find Aaron Jayjack on Instagram. You can find him on Twitter. You can find him, of course, on YouTube, and we encourage you to subscribe to his channel. You'll find some mind-blowing videos, including this one, Aaron. You got to tell us about this. Let's throw to this audio. What you're about to hear is softball-sized hail absolutely blowing up Aaron's windshield. Here he is from New Mexico.
Here comes emergency crews, guys. Emergency crews coming. I'm gonna keep up with the storm. I can't get in there anyway. There's power lines, but emergency crews are coming. I see lights just behind me.
That is, of course, video from the Didsbury tornado, but I want to load up this Roswell, New Mexico video. This is just wild. You got to check this out. Here's Aaron during a hailstorm like most people won't ever see.
Oh, that was a softball.
So whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening on the podcast, you can almost feel this happening. And Aaron, I guess you're experiencing your vehicle taking on some pretty significant damage in real time. Is this a gut punch at the time, or in a sick and twisted way, or are you kind of totally enjoying this?
Oh yeah, this was awesome. This is one of my best chases of that year. My window was already kind of beat up. The windshield had a couple of cracks in it already, so I usually, that's my favorite time of year is when I can finally punch into a big core and just blow it out completely.
So a hailstorm like that, when you're sort of, I guess, heading into that storm, when you're chasing a tornado, there's the visual, there's the tornado. A hailstorm is just kind of chaos all around. How do you approach that differently?
Yeah, so, the difference is, there's a little bit more of a caution with chasing a tornado as you're trying to make sure you're getting as close as possible, but keeping yourself a safe distance away. With the hailstorm, you're just driving right into the meat, the most dangerous part of the storm. And, and eventually, when you're chasing a supercell like that, you get to a point where you don't think the storm's going to produce a tornado, and now it's time to go get a different money shot, if you will. And in this case, it was blowing myself up in the hail core.
Yeah, absolutely unbelievable stuff. Is it for you and you guys you sort of have this storm chasing family? Is this something you guys do together? Is it the couple that chases storms together stays together, or are you oftentimes intrigued by different things and oftentimes on opposite sides of the continent?
Yeah, no, we definitely storm chase together. Don't take the kids unless it's a weak system and we're just going to look at pretty clouds and stuff and maybe a little bit of lightning. But in fact, one of my biggest tornado intercepts was August 7th, 2020 in Manitoba, near the town of Scarth, Manitoba. And my wife was with me. She was 9 months pregnant, and we intercepted, you can find it on YouTube, one of the most beautiful tornadoes that I had ever seen. And 2 days later, my wife gave birth to our son, Jet, and we're sitting in the hospital. And this made big news. It was all across Canada. Again, it was another event that was all around the world. And we're sitting in the hospital and watching myself doing these interviews on the TV there.
It's got to be pretty cool when a video gets a million hits, when something that you're working on, when your passion really connects with somebody and resonates with people, and in a circumstance like, to bring this full circle back to the Didsbury tornado, you at personal risk to yourself are taking people along and actually providing, in a way, a real service for folks that I mean, technology and social media allows now, something we couldn't have even imagined even 10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a very good point, because, I mentioned earlier about the joy, the blissfulness, like, it's what I love to do. I love being next to these storms, but one of the main roles out there as a storm chaser is being those eyes on the ground. I mentioned that the storm was producing a tornado before it was ever tornado warned. And the reason that is because radar is you've seen these radar stations maybe, and it's a beam that goes out at an angle and looks up into the storm. So the further away you are from the storm, the higher up that the radar is looking and being able to see. So meteorologists at Environment Canada, National Weather Service in the United States, they can't see with radar what's happening at the surface. So it comes to storm chasers like me to report out to the public and to these weather services of what's happening. And like I said, I'm live tweeting when I'm in the field. I'm also live streaming on YouTube when I'm in the field. So the goal is that hopefully people that live there that are in these, what I call danger zones, they'll tune in and they'll be able to see what's happening. You get an alert on your phone, and a lot of times people will ignore these warnings. And it's a big problem in Canada, especially. In the United States, tornado warnings are very localized. They're very good at getting the exact track of where that tornado is at. In Canada, they haven't honed it in as well. And sometimes you get half the province is tornado warned. Then the tornado might be, 300-400 kilometers away, and they're getting tornado warnings. And you get what's called warning fatigue. People have they've gotten tons of warnings and they've never seen a tornado. So then they stop ignoring them. Like, oh, it's not going to happen to me. And then eventually, it does happen to people. All the time that's the case that happens where they're used to ignoring it, and then they get hit by a tornado. So it's very important to be on the ground there, trying to provide that ground through those visuals. If people see a monster tornado like that Didsbury tornado, they're really going to take it a lot more seriously than if they just get a warning on their phone.
Yeah, no kidding. Well said. On our live chat, Cinderella says one of their colleagues actually lost their house in that tornado, the one that we're watching right now, your footage. It says we've been going out to help them clear debris from the fields. I can't even imagine. The debris was just, even just watching it, Aaron, I've been mesmerized. I think of your million views on that video, I think I'm like 100,000 of them. But it's amazing to see like huge pieces of, well, you don't know what it is, but it looks like plywood and car parts and barn roofing and like all kinds of stuff just swirling around. The power of nature is just absolutely wild. Lauren says we marvel at the power of nature. It wouldn't be possible without people like Aaron. What were you just going to say?
Well, if you look at that clip, as I'm driving up to the house, before you even see the trees that are snapped in half, the homes that are destroyed, one of the significant telltale signs that I knew was violent. And now watch here, you'll see a dark path going through the vegetation. That's ground scouring. The tornado was so powerful, it ripped the ground, the vegetation, the dirt right out of the ground. Right there, you see that black path. Wow. Right through the middle of the screen. That's the path that the vortex took.
Jillian says, incredible footage. This guy is so talented. How about this, Aaron? She says, this is what I mean when I tell my students they can do and be anything. How cool is that as a compliment? One question here from Tony. I don't remember the reference. I'm going to have to go back and rewatch Twister. But Tony says, is there an actual Dorothy device? Is that a real thing that can like read tornadoes, or was that just Hollywood?
Yeah, from Twister, right?
Yeah, from Twister.
Yeah, so I want to mention one thing about Twister. You mentioned it earlier. In fact, Twister is one of the things that actually kicked off my passion for these tornadoes. I was already interested in weather, just didn't know that you could storm chase. And then I saw Twister and it just blew my mind, right? I'm like, that's what I want to do with the rest of my life. So, but yeah, there are devices, scientific devices. I've actually been a part of some teams that we've deployed some devices into a tornado. In fact, one of my friends, a well-known storm chaser, has an armored vehicle, and we had rockets mounted at the top of it. And we launched a rocket into a tornado in Kansas in 2019, another EF4 tornado. And it shot this rocket up with a payload device that captured real-time data down to the armored vehicle. There's a Canadian in Alberta. He's on Twitter. You can find him. His Twitter handle is @ChaseandSpin. He's a brilliant guy, developed the scientific device. And we were getting real-time readings using radio transmission of data inside the tornado while it was happening.
So cool, man. We're really grateful that you were able to find time to talk to us. We knew it was, no pun intended, up in the air because at any moment you could be out on assignment. The good news now is hopefully you got a few thousand more followers, people that are going to be paying attention to whatever the next storm is that you're chasing. It's Aaron Jayjack we've been hanging out with here live from Manitoba. You can find him online, all of his Twitter handles, Instagram as well, @Aaron Jayjack. Thanks for this, my man. Stay safe out there.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. And I appreciate if anyone subscribes. It's tough being a storm chaser out there. It's really expensive. I think gas is like $7 a gallon here in Canada right now. So any support you guys provide to my channel keeps me out there in the field.
Yeah, Aaron, hey, be shameless for a second. Like, how do you, so professional storm chasers, so do you have like a Patreon or people can send you the kind of the tips on YouTube, or how do you monetize it?
Yeah, people can become members on my channel, and that's probably the best way because sometimes you run into problems. I just recently had some issues with YouTube demonetizing my video and removing earnings from my video because they said I had invalid views, which I didn't. And so it's really tough. I've had contracts with weather companies, where they're basically sponsoring me to be out there. But right now I'm in the process of actually looking for a new sponsorship or some kind of gig that's going to help me stay out there doing this and not put me back into a cubicle in corporate America or corporate Canada.
No, I feel like you're the type of guy that needs to be as far away from cubicles as possible. Yeah,
I agree. I was miserable. I thought I was like, what's the point of living being in a cubicle?
A lot of people are listening to this from cubicles. If that's a fit for you, great. It just doesn't strike me as a fit for Aaron. Exactly. Thanks, pal. It's a pleasure to call you a new friend, and we'll continue to watch what you're doing with great interest.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
You got it. Thanks. That's Aaron Jayjack, professional storm chaser. How cool is that? we're having a hard time kind of taking our pick of which footage we want to use, because I spent
There's
like
so
hours.
much of
This
it.
channel is wild. We didn't even get, I don't even know why. I do know why, because Mike Lake's sitting in our green room ready to go, and the show must go on.
Yeah.
But like, we didn't even talk about blizzards.
No.
You should see like his blizzard footage on his channel. If you're watching us on YouTube, I'll just throw some up here to check out as we're talking. But like, this is in South Dakota, but like he goes to places. I guess it's a shout out for Subaru as well. He drives a Subaru, and that thing obviously gets him to wherever he needs to go, including places where you wouldn't catch most people. Just an amazing calling.
Yeah, watching that footage, you feel like you're right there. I don't know if I could do something like that. I don't know if I could be that close.
Heading for a tornado,
Yeah.
heading into a hailstorm.
And I'm sure you become an expert after a while, but they're still so unpredictable. Like,
Oh, for sure.
could turn on you any second. So
For sure. Doing what he loves. That's Aaron Jayjack. In just a second, we're going to talk politics. Appreciate Mike Lake, who's going to be joining us in studio in just a second. These conversations happen because of Real Talk sponsors like our great friends at Friesen Brothers. Number one, I want to remind you that as August 1st approaches, the first day of the month, you can save 15% off grocery purchases of $75 or more. That's a big deal for families on a budget. Plus, they've got their Watermelon Fest coming up, including a watermelon eating contest. This is one that all of us can get behind. Wouldn't you agree? You can find out more details on their website, friesen.com. That's FRESON.com. They're also celebrating Grocery Heroes Day. That's coming up tomorrow. You can find details on their website. So much fun getting out on the golf course yesterday. Beautiful Ranch Golf and Country Club, where we have our Real Talk Golf Classic with a couple of our amazing golf tournament sponsors, great friends of Real Talk as well, the leadership team at Apex Automation. I said, what's the number one thing you want me to remind Real Talkers about when I let them know about our golf date tomorrow? I mean, aside from their smooth swings and birdie putts, they said, let them know we're hiring. We're looking for the best and brightest engineers in Canada, including engineers of the future. Those of you that are working towards your PEng, maybe you're graduating from a polytechnic school here in Alberta, maybe U of A, U of C, UBC, universities in Saskatchewan, Manitoba. They want to talk to you if you have interest in working in oil and gas, potash mining, robotics, autonomous vehicles, brewing, you name it, they automate it at apexautomation.ca. You know who else is hiring is our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy, looking for installers right now who want to work in Alberta and BC. They've got a head office right here in Edmonton, a beautiful one. They've just expanded another office down in Calgary. Congratulations. And a big one in Kamloops, too. It means that they're one of Western Canada's busiest solar installers, and you can start your renewable energy journey today by getting a free quote online at kubienergy.ca. And a shout out to Pathways Alliance. Interesting conversation yesterday with Liberal Minister Randy Boissonnault. We're going to be talking to Conservative MP Mike Lake in 30 seconds from now. Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Pathways Alliance. Oil sands operations contribute significant carbon emissions in Canada. So, the 6 largest companies are working together and with governments to take strides on the path to net zero from their operations. Part of their plan includes developing a proposed carbon capture and storage network by 2030. It's going to be one of the world's largest. You can learn more online right now at pathwaysalliance.ca. Our next guest is a veteran member of Parliament and a fierce community contributor. We're going to be talking about a national framework for autism in just a second, but let me get the welcome out of the way, and it's a special welcome always when it happens in studio. Conservative member of Parliament, Mike Lake. It's nice to see your face. Thanks for joining us here.
It's great to be here. It's tough to follow the tornado guy.
How wild is that?
That was pretty intense, and just watching those videos, I think he's specifically grown his hair out for maximum impact on his videos. It's like flowing in the background. I don't think I could quite have the same impact, nor would I think want to be chasing those tornadoes.
No, man. And I love when he introduces himself. He's like, "This is Storm Chaser Aaron Jayjack," and his hair is just going wild. And, yeah, amazing stuff. You're riding Edmonton, Wetaskiwin. I guess it's not necessarily like Didsbury, and where that tornado was certainly south of where you were at.
Quite a ways south. I drove through there though on the way to Stampede down to a just last week after the fact, and the cleanup's underway, but there's still it was pretty significant, obviously, and Thankfully, not more damage than there was given the intensity of it. Right?
Yeah, it's been kind of a wild summer for weather events and the wildfire season. Obviously earlier, and we got this smoke kind of hanging overhead, and it is prompting conversation about climate change. We didn't in this interview with Aaron draw a direct line between climate change and tornadoes, but he said that anecdotally he's noticed that there has been a change in storm activity. We're hearing the same from wildfire experts, and so you've got the scientific conversations around climate change, and then there's the politics of it as well, and governments grappling with the best way to set meaningful targets. We're talking about net zero targets. We'll be talking to Canada's Environment Minister on the show tomorrow. Take us into your perspective as an opposition MP. The conversations around climate change in Canada, obviously the big one comes down to how we price carbon and the jumping up of the carbon tax on July 1st. A lot of people have been talking about it over the past couple of weeks.
Well, and listened to the podcast yesterday and conversations around that. I mean, I think obviously our position is that carbon tax increase needs to be paused. Certainly as relates to the weather events that we're talking about and the smoke that we're talking about. I think that we need to understand more than just anecdotally what might or might not be happening. Right? Those are important things. A lot of people don't realize that in years where we have significant forest fires, my understanding from talking to folks is that about a third of our emissions in Canada come from forest fire smoke in those really bad years. So something that that any government and governments around the country are going to have to deal with from a quality of life standpoint and obviously a current impact, forest management, those kind of things. But as it relates to the economic stuff, the carbon tax, we believe, and I personally believe, is a tax plan more than anything else, more than an environmental plan. And the cost of living is drastically increasing in this country. I think that it's fair to say that we have a crisis right now on our hands in terms of the cost of living, the cost of housing, and other things. You see it across the country, and now is the absolute wrong time to be introducing a second carbon tax.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like sort of the two different perspectives, both of them very valid. People who's and I don't think you have to pick a lane on this one. I think you can be concerned about the environment and you can be concerned about the economy. I think that is possible, and most politicians, you would hope, have that on their radar. But we talked to pundits on the show, right? We talked to Jody Vance and Linda Steele and Charles Adler, all three. I asked them point blank, would you hit pause on pumping up the carbon tax, and all three said yes. And we asked Minister Boissonnault yesterday, and you could tell even as I didn't even get all the way through the question, he's already shaking his head no. People can check out that interview yesterday wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. Randy Boissonnault, Minister of Tourism, Associate Minister of Finance, talking about that July 1st increase. People estimate it to be about 14 cents at the pumps. That's how most people can, in real world dollars and cents, process what that increase looks like. He says it's got to be a straight line. You can't pause climate action to respond to where the economy's at. How would a conservative party or a conservative government navigate those factors? What do you think is a better solution?
Well, we've said that technology rather than taxes is the way to go. I mean, the reality is, and we're living in a province that has contributed significantly to the quality of life of Canadians through resources and agriculture and many other avenues. The reality is the world is using oil and gas right now, and we've stopped selling it to some degree. We've got a government right now that's decided to put the brakes on in a world where that continues to use oil and gas. The revenues from that oil and gas play a significant role in funding quality of life in Canada, in funding our healthcare systems, in funding our social services systems, our education systems across the country. And we believe that while the world's using oil and gas, we should sell Canadian oil and gas. No one is more dedicated to clean production than Canadians. And then let's invest in technology that we can export around the world to lead the world in wherever the world goes next.
You've been working on this, or sort of sitting on this environment committee, yeah, and this was, I think we're going to show a clip from April 12th of this year. So this is a few months ago. John, if we can load that one up. So we'll be talking, as mentioned, to Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault tomorrow. This was Mike Lake, our guest in studio, back on April 12th.
Is oil coming from Saudi Arabia and Nigeria subject to the same rigorous regulations around upstream and downstream emissions as oil coming from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland and Labrador?
Thank you for the question. I have, as you know, the Canadian Energy Regulator falls under Minister Wilkinson, so natural resources. I don't have the data that you're referring to in
So my
front of
question is
me.
just a straight up yes or no, because you're the Minister of the Environment. Is oil coming from Saudi Arabia and Nigeria subject to the same rigorous emissions on upstream and downstream emissions as oil coming from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland and Labrador?
I don't know by heart the regulations or legislation in Saudi Arabia.
Okay,
I would imagine that Canada's are more stringent, but I can't. I don't have any material to
the
to
rules
compare
that
there.
Canada has applies to oil coming from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland and Labrador would be more strict than the rules Canada applies to oil coming from Nigeria and Saudi Arabia. Canada's own rules. We treat our oil more toughly than we treat foreign oil coming over here. I think the answer is yes to that.
Well, I
clearly.
think, as you can imagine, we can't impose, it's very difficult to impose our bodies of laws and regulations to other nations, just like
Right. No,
we would find
agreed.
it difficult for other
Agreed.
nations to impose their bodies.
I'm going to move on.
12, the assertion being that the Canadian oil and gas companies not given a fair shake with Canadian regulations as compared to other oil-producing nations. A lot of the critics to that line of questioning will say, well, Canada doesn't control legislation there. We got to look after our own backyard. We have to be good global citizens.
But that's not his answer there, or non-answer, I guess, in a sense, isn't relevant to the situation. The government does control. In fact, in 2017, when TransCanada walked away from Energy East, they walked away because of a change at the in regulations that required an accounting of upstream emissions. Right? If we're going to allow oil to come from countries like Nigeria and Saudi Arabia, we pick those because they're the number 2 and number 3 countries that we import oil from behind the United States. If we're going to allow oil to be transported by tanker to Canada and then used in Canada, bought by Canada, $4 billion worth, we can certainly say, we can't regulate what the rules are in Nigeria and Saudi Arabia, but we can certainly say you have to account for the things in the same way as we say companies need to account for it in Alberta and Saskatchewan, Newfoundland and Labrador. We can say we're not taking the oil unless you account for upstream emissions, just like we do for Alberta oil.
Mm-hmm. It's for me, like, I'm not an expert. We try to talk to as many experts as we possibly can about, people talking about pipeline expansion, and they'll, some will argue that we need to expand our pipeline network even further to meet global demand for oil over the next number of decades. Others will say, well, we're not even using the pipelines we have to capacity. But if you look at the numbers, Alberta's outlook's pretty good right now for oil and gas production. Do you think that the reality of that is lost in the mix of all the saber rattling and political posturing around pipelines? The fact that the oil and gas industry is actually doing pretty good in Alberta right now.
Look, if you take a look broadly at the Canadian economy, we're running tens of billions of dollars in deficit. We've taken on more debt than at any time in Canadian history. We have to take steps to deal with the economic impact of that. And one of the ways that you can take steps is to increase revenues. One of the ways that we can increase revenues is to, instead of importing $14 billion in oil as we did in the last year that was recorded, 2021, we could be selling Canadian oil. Right, we imported another $16 billion in refined oil products that year, so $30 billion in total. In fact, in 2021, we imported $400 million in refined oil product from Russia in 2021, the last recorded year. That we, instead of selling Canadian oil.
Yeah, I don't know that Canadians would have an appetite to be importing oil from Russia right now, but yeah, most recent numbers, 400 million. How do you? Is it okay with you if we swerve all the map here a little bit? What's your assessment of Canada's involvement in Ukraine right now? I'm paying attention to some of the headlines. I believe that conflict is past the 500-day mark right now, and some reporters on the ground in Kyiv and elsewhere are saying that Ukrainians themselves are saying they're concerned that the Western world is starting to lose interest in that war there, and that conflict there. How would you assess Canada's involvement in Ukraine, including sanctions against Russia?
Well, I think that you just touched on the key point, that we can't lose interest. And I think that in this, the environment that we're in, the social media environment, the political environment, I think too easily it's easy to move from one thing to another, whatever it is that's drawing attention. It's what's happening there is very significant. I think that there's a broad conversation that we can have around our role in the international community broadly, our role in NATO. Of course, that's been a conversation that we've had. The Prime Minister recently saying it sounds like behind closed doors that there's no appetite or no willingness for the government to even move towards our NATO target. And I think those are conversations that we need to continue to have.
How close of an eye are you paying on American politics right now? When I think NATO, I think of former President Trump calling everybody to the carpet and demanding more contributions, or in fairness, that some countries make good on their contributions.
Listen, I haven't been, I serve by far the largest constituency in Canada right now by population, probably twice the size of the national average. So after 9 out of 10 weeks in Ottawa and everything going on there, when I've come back to the constituency over the last couple of weeks, it's been a lot of time spent with constituents talking about what's happening in Canada.
Do you see similarities in American politics and Canadian politics right now?
In terms of the discourse, in terms of the style,
the vibe.
I think that it's actually international nature. I don't even think it's limited to North America. I've spoken fairly significantly about this, the level of discourse and the way that we conduct our politics, and certainly. I think that there has to be a change. I think there's a real appetite for a change in the way that we all conduct politics right now.
Yeah.
I think that we're all too quick to try to push our opponents to the extremes and make our opponents seem more extreme than they are. I think on all sides that happens, and I think there's 80% of people in the middle who in middle, from sort of middle left to middle right, who want to see a change. And I think that, quite frankly, I think that there's probably a big win in any country where parties grasp that.
I totally agree with you. That's like, to spell it out, that's this show's target market. I believe that there's a silent majority in the middle that in some circumstances is afraid to say anything right now, afraid to speak up for fear. People are coming out of COVID, and I think that there have been a lot of damaged relationships, and I think a lot of people are still or not still, let me just say, even just starting to realize the beginnings of the psychological impact that COVID had on them. And I just feel like the discourse seems to be more poisonous. I feel like politics and the strategy is more poisonous. I look all around and I sort of, to use the storm metaphor from earlier, I hope the dust settles on it, but I don't know that I find reason for optimism there. Do you have optimism that politics can get back to being decent again?
I always have optimism. Now, I don't think it's just politicians. I think we're in a new world where social media has opened up conversations. Everybody now seems to be coming to every conversation with talking points. It's not just politicians coming with their bullet points. It's everyone coming to every conversation. But it's not. This isn't only a new issue. It takes on a new sort of context with the social media world that we're in, and of course. But Eisenhower, I think back, 6 decades ago or something, talked about the middle of the road being all of the usable space, the extremes right and left being in the gutters. Right, that was the way Eisenhower talked about it back many decades ago, and so maybe it's not quite as different as we think it is.
I wish I could. I think it was maybe Ken. I wish I could remember who it was, but someone in our live chat yesterday, we were talking. You knew I mentioned it to you ahead of time, bring up green shirt guy at the Calgary Stampede, but this guy that managed to get some photos with some pretty prominent politicians, including Alberta's premier and your party's leader, Pierre Poilievre. Someone on our show, as this guy starts ripping Poilievre after, he's pissed off at Danielle Smith and Poilievre now. He calls the leader of Canada's Conservatives a leftist. He's upset, I guess, that Poilievre apologized for the photo. And I said, on what planet is Pierre Poilievre a leftist? And I think it was Ken in our live chat said, when you're that far on the right side of the ditch, the whole road is on the left. How bad does something like that photo, hurt the image of the party or hurt the image of the conservative movement?
Look, we're in an era right now where anybody can grab the spotlight at any time. And so you wind up in a situation where, let's face it, someone with a t-shirt can show up pick your T-shirt, pick your phrase on a T-shirt, whatever it is, can show up at any event. And I listened to the conversation that you had with Randy yesterday. I didn't agree with with where you went. I think by and large, if you're thinking about a political world where you're at an event with thousands of people, hundreds of people, whatever the case is, you don't look at every context of every person that's coming to take a picture with you. It's like you get a lineup of one after another, and people can say, well, the staffers should have been paying more attention. But I know in my world, when I'm having a conversation with constituents at an event or something like that, if my staff are around, oftentimes someone approaches us and has an immigration issue they want to talk about, or a CRA issue or something like that. My staff are always attuned to what folks are needing in that environment. And you're not always paying attention to every single T-shirt that somebody might be wearing. I think we got a broader problem that we need to talk about in society where, right now, someone showing up at an event with a T-shirt or a hat or, whatever it might be, or in some other way, can just immediately capture the national media attention, right? For whatever it is that whatever point they're trying to make. And I think that, in the world that we're in with a massive, social media impact and audiences people have, and whatever the case is, we just we can't go down a road where we just chase after the most controversial thing that we see on social media in the day. Because what we're doing is we're just ceding ground to whatever agenda anybody has. And it doesn't matter who that person is. It doesn't matter how many people are following them. The more controversial the agenda, the more we're talking about it, and the less we're talking about things like the economy and the real crisis that we're in economically right now, or our like crime issue, the safety of our streets right now, which is something that we really need to be talking about right now.
I was lamenting that during the Alberta, the provincial election, the recent campaign, where I just felt like, not to say that some of the issues weren't relevant. Danielle Smith's conversation with Artur Pavlovsky is relevant. The comments from some candidates and some ridings were relevant, but they were driving on such a short campaign period. They were driving the public attention away from issues. Whereas if you would say to somebody, where does the NDP or the UCP stand on the curriculum rewrite, which is significant, or maybe more fulsome talk on an Alberta pension plan or the future of policing, or like what have you, whatever, universal basic income or childcare plans, or people would like to know what's Alberta's position on national pharmacare, how they play ball with the feds. I mean, these are like off the top of my head. We could come up with 100 of these, and we were talking about like virtually none of them for probably the better part of the campaign period. And that's not to say that some of the other situations didn't deserve attention and commentary and clarification. But I do agree. I think that, in this show, like, we'll get blowback for having Randy Boissonneau on yesterday, and then we'll get blowback from different people for having you on. You'll get blowback from some people for coming on this show, and others will applaud. Some are applauding in the live chat right now, saying it's great to seeing you participate, great to see you here. I remain steadfast in my resolve that this can be a place where we can have these conversations, where people that voted for different political parties can talk about issues that matter to them and potential solutions.
Ryan, we're becoming a society, though, that's afraid to have conversations.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's a real challenge for us. Our democracy is not going to be any stronger if we can't have conversations, or if we refuse to have conversations simply because we're afraid to have conversations. So I'll tell you, from a political standpoint, we want more people to get politically engaged, right? But over the years, I've noticed, I'll obviously door knock a lot in my own riding. My riding's pretty conservative part of the country, so you'll go out and you'll get a lot of election signs. But I've gone door knocking in the university area, for example, for conservative candidates, or downtown for conservative candidates. You'll talk to somebody that's every bit as enthusiastic a conservative supporter as in my constituency, and you'll ask them, do you want a lawn sign? Oh, I can't put a lawn sign up in my neighborhood. My neighbors, for fear of what their neighbors would think, right? And I suspect that in parts of my constituency, the same thing would happen if you're an NDP candidate or a Liberal candidate in our area, right? We can't be afraid to talk about politics. On one side, I think that we have sort of this tendency towards extremes that's amplified on one side, but then you've got a lot of folks who are afraid to have a conversation at all. So these are conversations that we have to start driving.
In 2021, to give people an idea, you talk about you live in a pretty conservative riding. You won with like 66, 67% of the vote, Edmonton, Wetaskiwin, which is huge. And so here's the rub. Here's the question, and this is what we'll debate with political scientists and experts and commentators all the way up to the next federal election, and that is, how do the Conservatives win in areas where they're not currently winning? You would never admit this, but you probably don't have to door knock at all in your riding. You probably don't have to campaign at all, and no politician wants to say that on the record, but that's a fact. But there will be some fierce fights in parts of Vancouver, as if I need to tell you, obviously in the Maritimes and in Greater Toronto and that type of a thing. Your party's had a new leader for a while now. That sort of new car smells wearing off a little bit. We see his image evolving. We see all these things happening as the opposition kind of starts to gear up for the next campaign. How do the Conservatives win in areas where they're not currently holding seats? What do you think is the key?
I think that, we've got to work hard. We've got to continue to reflect what Canadians are thinking in terms of our messaging. We've got, as a leader, one of the strongest communicators, I think, in the House of Commons. And, I think as a team, we need to communicate that we care about, that we have our eye on the issues that are important to Canadians. So, in my roundtables in Edmonton, Wetaskiwin, I imagine that many of the conversations are similar to conversations that are happening in the GTA or other parts of the country. Conversations, in fact, probably more so around housing affordability in some of those areas, right? Where we just see astronomical increases in the price of housing. But I think that there's also conversations that people are concerned about, in regards to public safety, in regards to the fact that in virtually every city in this country right now, people are less likely to want to ride public transit because of things that they see every day happening in our transit systems.
Let me read this. I'm reading this cold on the air, which I don't typically like to do because I haven't reviewed this. But I just knew. I checked my email this morning and I got an email from Garth. He's a real talker. You can hit me up anytime. talk@ryanjesperson.com. The subject line is angry, scared, and depressed. He says, Jesper, I'm not here to engage in trash talk. That's our Friday tradition, of course, he says. But rather, I want to express my genuine anger and concern. In other words, he doesn't want me showboating and making light of his email about Edmonton's high crime rate. He says, with 1.86 homicides per 100,000 citizens, Edmonton is now Canada's third deadliest city. He says, I'm beyond pissed off. I'm genuinely scared. When all this started, I realized I hadn't used public transit in more than a decade, except for 1 month after I migrated to Canada from Jamaica. That was in 2013, so 10 years ago. He says, what frightens me most is I come from a country that averages 45 murders per 100,000 people, but Jamaica doesn't have random stabbings or people driving around shooting strangers. He says, I know how badly not dealing with this can turn out. And if we start politicizing these issues, we'll all lose. We'll lose our privilege of safety. He says, I'm really not trying to engage in another round of trash talk. As a concerned Edmontonian, I just don't know of any other platform that'll give regular people like me a voice. Garth, my man. He says, that's why I'm sending this to you. He says, please do a show. Please shed light on what's driving this spike in crime. I'll let people know Councillor Sarah Hamilton and Aaron Paquette joined us in studio, I don't know what, Johnny, about a month ago, I think it was, for a great roundtable on crime. Check our archives for that. He says, I know that I see our mayor calling on the feds to expedite bail reform, but I'd like to know what's different now compared to when he voted for the exact same thing that he's now denouncing. Garth says, do I get extra points for not dropping a single F-bomb? There you go, Garth. But that's a sincere person sharing a sincere concern. I just got that about midnight last night.
This is every constituent roundtable I have, and we host, we're very serious about hosting as many constituent roundtables as we can to have every constituent have the opportunity that wants to come out, have the opportunity to have a say. It's one of the top issues, probably one of the top 3 issues that we hear is the issue around public safety and bail reform. Absolutely, we need to understand as the government has talked about, the trauma and understand the impacts of mental health and all of those different things. But when you can find a balance where you navigate those issues and still have real consequences for criminal behavior. And, there's that consequence side of things. And then there's the public safety side. We are just not safe. You sit down and do a, briefing, as I've done, and most members of parliament would have the chance to sit down with police officers in their riding and maybe sit in their daily briefing. And those briefings almost always, when I've had the chance to be a part of them, involve just a recounting of who's out today. It's almost like they know who is going to be committing crimes, and they're watching them based on who just got out of the system. And obviously that's a problem that we need to address. I think that the government's undertaken some fairly experimental policies, the Liberal government, over the last 8 years, and we've seen, as a result of those policies, a 32% increase in violent crime. And it is evident to anyone that pays attention. It doesn't matter who you voted for. We have a serious problem right now that we need to address, and we need to take serious measures to address those issues. And if it means calling back Parliament early to get legislation passed, as the Mayor has called on, as others have called on, I think the provincial government, I think Mike Ellis called on this the other day, then we should get back to work and do that.
I want to ask you about something before we thank you for your time. This was, relatively speaking, a short time ago. Unanimous support in the House for action for a national framework on autism. This is something that impacts you and your family personally. I know this is a driving force and has been through your political career in large part because of your wonderful son, Jaden. But talk to us about this development and what it meant to hear no nay votes when the speaker put it in front of your 180 odd colleagues there.
Well, a few thoughts on that. We didn't get there by fluke. It was a lot of work to kind of get to that point of unanimity. It's always tricky when you're dealing with something that has the word national in it or federal in it when you're dealing with the bloc. So there was a little bit of negotiation. The language that was used was that we agreed with unanimous consent to pass the legislation on division, which means we didn't force the bloc to stand up and vote one way or another, because that would have been difficult for them. Our mission wasn't to wedge anybody politically. Our mission was, as 338 people who recognize that that there's important action that needs to be taken, that if we get this right, we start to benefit as a country from including the unique skills and abilities that people with autism have, and help to mitigate challenges, that we're better off as a country if we do that. And took a lot of work in the background, working with members from all parties, particularly Michael Coteau in the Liberal Party in the House of Commons, and huge credit to Senator Husakos, a Conservative in the Senate, and Peter Beam, a Trudeau-appointed senator in the Senate, for coming together and driving it in the Senate in the first place. So one of those moments where you can feel really good that you made that extra effort to walk across. Importance of being in person in the House of Commons, walking across the floor, having a conversation in the background with colleagues to try and strategize how we move it forward, and thankfully we were successful. Yeah,
I got to fact check myself. I gave the Liberals a little more credit. I said 180. They got 160 seats, I think. But there you have it.
Whatever the case, it's too many.
You can say it's too many. But anyway, the point being, you don't see stuff like that often, and I think that when you want to talk about what the public wants to see from politicians, maybe it's a little easier. I'm not saying you haven't put hard work into it, but it's a little easier for folks to get on the same page around something like this than it is maybe on how do we approach carbon pricing, or how do we approach other more contentious issues. But regardless, it's good to see that cooperation.
It is good to see that cooperation. And, it's also important to say that as we try and drive towards more civility in the House, it doesn't mean that you don't debate things. Yeah. We have some big issues facing our country right now, and we need to be fiercely debating those things. There are very different opinions on how to move forward in this country. And so you just don't have to debate everything that fiercely. Sometimes there is a little bit of common ground, but other times we want to, there are some significant issues that we need to face and take very significantly, and we're going to have fierce debates in the House of Commons. You can just do it in a way that is still civil and still respectful.
What do you think is going to be the ballot box question next federal election?
Oh my gosh, I don't know exactly, but I would say the economy. I mean, the challenges in the economy right now are not going away. Yeah. And, I think as we move forward, you talk about people's mortgages coming due in a couple of years, in the next 2 years with the higher rates. And I think there's going to be some real challenges with that. But the public safety question right now, it's increasing in prominence. We're hearing more and more about it from constituents. So I think there's probably those para issues are front and center. there's still conversations probably to have about foreign interference and fully understanding what happened with that situation as well. So we'll kind of see. I think, we come back in September. The House starts sitting again fairly regularly between September and December, and what we're talking about today could change. But I don't see the economy and the public safety questions going away in the near term.
Yeah. That's Conservative MP Mike Lake. I'm not sure. I don't know that everybody knows this about you, but, in my previous job on terrestrial radio, one of the more memorable roundtables we had was inspired by your Zoom happy hour tradition. I think we've had a Zoom happy hour roundtable on Real Talk as well, if I remember.
We had a little mini version, because I think you could only do 4 people at a time. So
but yeah, it's really neat what you do. Maybe in closing, let people know, and your staff is no joke about you're doing like 4 of these a week or something.
Right now, during the summer, we're doing 4 a week.
But you're not bringing a bunch of people from like the conservative constituency associations together. You're putting these rosters together of people with, in some cases, very different thought processes or convictions to get together on a 2-hour hangout. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, it came about from this idea of not being able to have conversations. So we decided to we've had these very successful constituent roundtables where we get together for the whole 17 years I've been a member of Parliament. We get together 16 people at a time, and we just find those to be incredibly productive for a couple of hours. When COVID hit, and we have significant stakeholders that we've worked with on a variety of issues over many, many years, the autism issue, international development stuff, of course, people from conservative politics and media and other things. We started to kind of recognize, well, now all of a sudden everybody's able to understand how to use Zoom. It doesn't take 4 hours to teach everybody how to use Zoom so you can have a half-hour meeting. Everybody knows how to use it. And we just started calling interesting people that we thought were interesting from across the political spectrum together to have. They're not broadcasts. They're just a private kind of conversation in a sense with 9 people who we think are doing important things around the world, to have conversations in a bit of a safe zone. And again, people from across the political spectrum. I include colleagues, of course. And we've just found it. We've heard no end of fantastic connections that people have made who might be working in very disparate areas, and suddenly they meet each other on one of these Zoom happy hours, and the next thing you know, they're working together for the common interest. Someone who might work in the disability world working with someone who might work in the international development world or the mental health world, and have never met. Follow up after a Zoom happy hour and have a coffee, and next thing you know, they've got a collaboration. So we're losing something by not being able to have that type of conversation. And so we're fortunate enough to have a platform that we can use to try and bring people together and sort of convene these conversations.
Well, thanks for making yourself available for this one, Mike. Really appreciate it. You're a guy that's always walked the walk when it's come to being available to take some questions and to kick the ball around on some ideas. And I know that you welcome the feedback as well. People can hit you up on your Twitter at Mike Lake MP, and they can check out your website, mikelake.ca, to learn more about the Member of Parliament for Edmonton, Wetaskiwin. Thanks for hanging out in studio.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, good to see you. This conversation, in just a second, we're going to get to some details, and Johnny and I have to take on a story from one of the most legendary burger chains in the world. I'm talking about In-N-Out Burger. That's coming up in just a second, but we want to remind you that these conversations are presented by Real Talk sponsors like Eden Landscaping. You can find them online at landscapeedmonton.ca. I was telling you, this week's been a big one for us because all the talk and the planning and the going back and forth and the budget deliberations and everything else has now come to fruition, and we have broken ground on our backyard overhaul. We're so excited to be working with the team at Eden Landscaping, a custom landscape builder. You can tell, I mean, they've got more than 20 years experience, and it is evident in every single step of the journey, even the way that they drop off their equipment, even the way that they're diligent on the tiny little things, like they're putting the fence back together, and they're saying, hey, what's your plan with letting the dogs out to pee while we're in the backyard? And they consider all the little things, and of course very competent in the big stuff as well, whether it's irrigation and drainage, whether it's an outdoor kitchen you'd love to introduce, maybe you need a retaining wall. Finally, you can trust the team at Eden Landscaping. You'll find them online, landscapeedmonton.ca. Hey, everybody knows about the amazing work that the YWCA of Edmonton is doing, right? Well, they're absolutely thrilled to have been named the 50/50 partner for this year's K-Days. How cool is that? It's the 50-50 raffle at K-Days in Edmonton from July 21st to 30th. But here's the thing. They need you to volunteer. Yeah, that's right. They're looking for volunteers to help them out so they can make the most of this amazing opportunity, funding incredibly important programs through the YWCA of Edmonton. You'd be on the volunteer team on the K-Days grounds between July 21st and 30th, just spreading word about the 50-50. Here's the deal. You get in free. You got free transportation with ETS. They're going to hook you up with a $10 food voucher as well. Be a part of the movement for change. You can register as a volunteer by checking out ywcaofedmonton.org or just scroll down in the show notes here, whether you're listening to the podcast or checking it out on YouTube. Follow the link to support the YWCA of Edmonton. I saw an audience member earlier today saying, Jesperson, major missed opportunity after the Storm Chaser segment to not go directly to a Dairy Queen Blizzard mention. And I thought, that's a very fair point. That's a very good point. How did I not go from talking about snowstorms in Wyoming to Reese's Caramel Pretzel Blizzard treats from the Dairy Queens of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park? Point taken. You know, summer should be one big adventure for you and your taste buds, and the new Reese's Caramel Pretzel Blizzard treat is here to take you on the adventure of a lifetime. It's a salty, sweet thrill ride up a crunchy pretzel and peanut trail. Will you join me, Johnny? Leading to a world-famous DQ soft serve peak. Oh, yeah. Indulgent peanut butter cup cliffs. And, of course, a river of decadent caramel bliss. It's one of the summer feature blizzards at the Dairy Queens in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Roads. And before we get to this story out of the U.S., I want to remind you about Grand Dog Essentials quality raw food. This is what we proudly feed our two pups, Moses and Monroe. They're both on different diets, and we've helped put those plans together in collaboration with the team at Grand Dog. This is a family-owned business, and they care deeply about the health of your furry friends. It's not just quality raw food for dogs. They've got great options for cats as well. And if you go to the Shop Now link, you can learn more about the supplements they've got. Coming up, future episodes of Real Talk, including this week, we're going to tell you about some of the specials they have going on this month. But right now, I want to tell you about the hip and joint supplement. It's natural joint support from the team at 4 Leaf Rover. We're using this for Moses, our aging boxer, and we're seeing the results. It's really incredible. The promo code Real Talk knocks 10% off your first-time order, delivered to your door in Alberta via granddog.ca. So this story out of the In-N-Out burger franchise in the U.S., arguably the most storied burger franchise stateside for people that love their 4x4s, animal style. If you know, you know. In-N-Out is an institution for a lot of people, but they've made news in now 5 of the 7 states where In-N-Out operates. They are banning employees from wearing masks.
Yeah, I heard about this.
Unless you have a doctor's note.
Really?
Yeah, including in California, where In-N-Out is legendary. Unless you have a doctor's note that there's a medical reason that you've got to be wearing a mask, In-N-Out says it's time to take them off.
It seems a little backwards to me. I think we're out of the mask phase, but I still see people wearing them, and I don't know. Even before COVID, though, if you've ever taken a flight to Vancouver or Europe or Asia, like masks were pretty prevalent before.
Yeah.
I know that's a different setting in an airport, but it just seems weird to ban a mask if somebody wants to wear one, needs to wear one, or is worried about, I'm sure there's going to be another virus that'll come along, or even if it's flu season, maybe just now you can't afford to take time off. Maybe you want to wear a mask just so you don't miss work.
Yeah.
At In-N-Out Burger. So it seems a little ridiculous.
The company, this is according to a memo that was made public. That's kind of the way it goes these days. This reporting per the LA Times. As of August 14th, employees without a doctor's note will no longer be allowed to wear these face coverings. They say, or says the memo, that the policy has been implemented to help promote clear and effective communication between between employees and customers. They say we're introducing new mask guidelines that emphasize the importance of customer service, the ability to show our associates smiles and other facial features while considering the health and well-being of all individuals. They say if you want to continue wearing a mask, the medical note has to describe a specific medical condition or health request or concern that would require you to wear a mask. And then they've got to wear a company-provided N95. So you can't even bring your own. The company's got to provide. I would imagine it probably has like In-N-Out branding on it or something like that. Failure to comply, says the memo, may result in disciplinary action. I'd be curious to see if somebody runs that up the chain and takes them to court.
That's a little far.
And an infectious disease expert and author by the name of Dr. Judy Stone has released a public note denouncing the new policy, saying that it violates COVID-19 recommendations by the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, and endangers employees. So I'd be curious to see if more companies will step out like this.
I don't think here in Canada, but I do understand the one part of that where they were talking about people with clear communication. There is a portion of the population, and I met one at an event recently who people with hearing disabilities, learning disabilities, if they can't see your mouth moving, it's a big thing for them. People who read lips, it was like a nightmare for this person I actually met, and it kind of put things into focus for me on some things I hadn't been thinking about during COVID, where people with even mental health issues, like if they can't see your mouth moving, some people get almost into hysterics, especially people with like hearing disabilities. Like they literally communicate through reading your lips. So I think there is a small portion of the population who could benefit from that, but I don't see a tons of chains doing this. Do you think they're doing this to possibly not dissuade, like to not set people off who are against masks, who maybe they're customers? Is that what the thing is?
Are masks divisive anymore? Like, I mean, I'll be honest, like just to say it, I saw somebody, and I know someone will get pissed off at me for saying this, but I saw somebody yesterday driving in their car, all the windows rolled up by themselves wearing their mask. And I'll be honest, like, and I don't know anything about their circumstance, but I just kind of like, it just kind of made me smirk, not at them, but I just kind of like, I don't know, it just kind of made me smirk. Like, but also I don't know anything about them. I don't know anything at all about their circumstance. Maybe I should just shut the fuck up. But I don't think that if I see someone
maybe there's a sick person lying in the back. Maybe you can see.
Or who knows? Maybe they have full-blown COVID and they're on their way to the nursing home to visit their parents. No, I don't know. But I don't think that masks are divisive anymore. If I see somebody wearing a mask on a job, I go, okay, fine, do whatever you want. Wearing a mask on, do whatever you want.
I mean, maybe down south, but I think the temperature up here has cooled.
Maybe a little different.
The whole mask
although
thing.
I think that
And
maybe some people are
them.
kind of triggered by masks too, like because they've moved on, they want everybody else to move on too, and not everybody has moved on. Like I saw, there's some great comments by the way on our live chat right now. We love you guys. But who was it? Someone said, "Why are we talking about this like this is over? It's not over. What? This is Tracy. Why is this being discussed like COVID's gone?" Tracy says wastewater numbers beg to differ. I agree.
Well, we're not saying that, but the rules and regulations regarding it are gone, right? Which is why we're talking about it.
Yeah.
But again, at this big, large outdoor event I was at, where I met someone with a hearing, who basically was deaf, I also saw people wearing masks outside.
Yeah.
This was a food event. It was a live music event. People are still wearing them, even outside. So.
Yeah, some are. Yeah. Ryan says, why is this controversial? It's time to take off the mask. One person on a plane previous to COVID doesn't make masks prevalent. There's certainly more now.
One person. Have you ever flown?
Well, in Asia. I mean, if you look in Japan.
No, but even in Vancouver,
normal,
I lived in Vancouver. Tons of people wear masks.
Yeah.
Even before COVID.
If you do, fine. If you don't, fine. That's my take on it. Tracy says, my daughter who has lupus, still, who can't get any virus, still wears her mask at work and is still getting harassed. MA says they put their mask on again because of the smoke. Yeah. I think that, for a lot of people, it's like, the mindset is, it's post-COVID. And then if you talk to people that are like in the medical profession, it's not post-COVID, but for whatever reason, and talk shows like this have a role to play here in discussing this. Like, how did we get there and where are we? And I think for a lot of people, it was just pandemic exhaustion, where as soon as, like, the big game changer for a lot of people was getting that first vaccination, then the second, and then you get boosted. And then I think for a lot of people, it was like, That's it. There was pre-vaccine, there was post-vaccine, and now for a lot of people, it's like post-pandemic. It's now an endemic. I mean, it has changed, but it's not gone. It's never going to be gone.
We know that, but like both of us, we had all our vaccines. I had 3. I got COVID as well.
Yeah.
For me, it's not like totally in the rear view, but I'm just saying, I think most people, the temperature is cooled. Even if you see someone wearing a mask, like I don't think anything of them. Maybe if they're in a car with the windows rolled up, like you said, driving by.
But again, I don't know what's going on. It just made me
You don't know what
smile.
they're facing. You don't know what they're going through, right?
No idea.
But this seems ridiculous to me for someone who maybe, like I said in the beginning, just doesn't want to get sick and actually miss work. But the only thing I can think is that, because what would be the reasoning for this other than you don't want to piss off your customers who may be against masks?
Yeah. I mean, I do think it is somewhat of a remarkable step. It's always more remarkable when you're the first. And it'll be easier for subsequent companies and corporations to make announcements similar to this policy-wise. And it's not just, is this still called a mask mandate? I guess this would be an unmask mandate. But it's the same as the back to work.
Sure.
Like a lot of people are seeing their companies, probably more private companies than others, but saying, and there's a whole bunch of factors at play here, including downtown vacancy rates and office leases and all that kind of stuff. I mean, even Mike Lake here made the comment. He said, he made that slight comment where he said, in the house, like face to face, people want to see their politicians back in the house or back in the legislature.
And like front counter at In-N-Out Burger, okay, I get it. Maybe in the kitchen, if things are loud, they need to see each other's lips. But like if you're working the drive-through, what's the problem with you wearing the mask? They don't see you till they come up.
I guess
and you
as long
hand
as
them
people
the bag.
can
They
understand
hear you, right?
you
know what I mean?
Yeah, fair enough. A lot of people. Andrew wonders, why are people freaking out about masks? If it makes people feel more comfortable, then let them wear them.
I never got it the whole time.
Yeah, it says, why are people trying to police what others do? I thought we had freedom. That from Andrew. Fair play, pal. Fair play. Alberta girl says that she's been reading headlines. Says there's headlines today that say that long COVID is set to collapse healthcare. We don't even know much about long COVID yet, right? This is a type. It's like we know more about the impact of polio on the generation, the 70 and 80-year-olds now than we did during polio or 5 years after the fact, right? So Ben says wearing a mask voluntarily, a personal choice, because of smoke or medical concerns, only makes sense. And Justin says the number of people that are refusing or afraid to get boosters who got the initial vaccine are kind of baffling to me.
A lot of people wearing masks lately with just the smoke and fire, like you just mentioned, because it gives people, like my partner Jatinder, like massive headaches for the last 2-3 weeks, right? So
How about this from Tracy? Tracy's tying together all of our talking points over the past month. Says no masks allowed because a few customers don't like to see them. No pride jerseys allowed because a few fans will complain. Says Tracy. That's what Chuck was saying yesterday. Charles Adler. The majority needs to be more loud. Wondering why those on the fringes are sucking up so much oxygen in the conversation. You can hear Charles Adler
loudest.
every Monday right here on the show or the first episode of every week.
And during COVID, they were the loudest too. And that's why during COVID, like there was, like you just said, we're not going to know everything about COVID for decades, right? We're not going to know everything we need to know, all the research, all the impacts of it. But even during COVID, everyone was trying to be an expert. And I was just sitting back being like, I don't know. Even the experts don't know because they won't know for years. So
people are saying right now, Jess, but we know a lot more about long COVID. Nobody's covering it in the news. Sure, we know a little bit about it, but I'm just saying, like something that's named long COVID, we'll know more about it the longer we are away from COVID. But I'll take your point. We do know. We do. Of course, there's a lot of research happening right now, and people much smarter than us are on that. Andrew, I don't know if I agree with Andrew on this one. Says if your job can be completed at home, you should have the option to work from home. A forced back to the office policy is just because managers or company owners don't trust employees. I think that could be part of it, but I think also there is in some industries there's something to be said for being there in person, for collaborating, for the magic that happens at a group workstation or around a boardroom table or with people, shooting the shit at the water cooler and
so I can go
bouncing
home?
ideas back off each other. I mean, we could do this show 100%. You could be at home. I could
totally
be at home.
could do this from home.
We could, but
But I see.
Like, when would we shake martinis? Like,
or fist bump. Yeah. But I see, even when I'm driving downtown now, I think of all the office buildings, or even when we were looking for content on LA the other day, I was like, I wonder how many of those office buildings where it used to be such a meeting point, right? The water cooler, the meeting room, where half of those people are probably at home now. And like Mike was saying, everyone knows how to use Zoom now. Everything is taking place on Zoom, through text, through email. It's a strange new world.
Yeah, certainly is. Wanted to let you know, coming up on tomorrow's show, you can get your questions in now. We're going to be pulling a couple of comments from Mike Lake, and we'll put those in front of Canada's Environment Minister. The Honourable Stephen Guilbeault will join us on tomorrow's show. But out of the gates, it's going to be the publisher of Canada's National Observer. Linda Solomon Wood is going to take us into her column on what she describes the tragedy of the commons, Google, Meta, and Canada's Online News Act. That's Bill C-18, the one that everybody's talking about but maybe doesn't understand. We'll get into the details and then chew on them. Thanks for joining us right here on Real Talk.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical